Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
Education Corner podcast would like to welcome Mrs. Fionnuala Kennedy, head at Wimbledon High School. Wimbledon High School described themselves as a school with each individual at its heart, where girls are known and nurtured and where laughter fills the air. They strive to be a thriving hub of intellectual activity and encourage cross-curricular links through innovative and supportive teaching. The school enjoys close connections with partner schools and across the GDST, and so students are encouraged to look up and find out their way in bringing about change for the good. Fionnuala joined Wimbledon High School in 2015 and has been head since 2020. Prior to this, she worked at the likes of Royal Hospital School and Waldingham School and has a wealth of experience leading schools and supporting people's success. Firstly, would you like to tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be at Wimbledon High School?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a 100% bursary student at my own independent senior school in Bath. So my father was in the military, and then the rest of the money that we were meant to pay was topped up for me. So I know full well how amazingly game-changing a great independent sector education can be. Because my father was in the military, we moved around everywhere, which is why I have a crazy Irish name, but no accent. And then I studied English at Oxford and started off in publishing, resisting the call of English teaching for as long as possible. My mother had been an English teacher. My aunt is an English teacher. I thought it'd be terribly unoriginal to join them. But actually, it turns out, it's so cheesy to say it, but the very first time I taught a Macbeth GCSE lesson was the first time that I thought, you can have a job and really enjoy yourself. So that was at the Royal Hospital School in Suffolk. I went on to be head of middle school and then started at Waldingham, which was my first all-girls education experience as head of sixth, and then couldn't resist when the phone call came and the chance to come to Wimbledon High came about. So started here as deputy pastoral 10 years ago. I can't believe it.
Wow.
And managed to time it beautifully so that I could take on the role of head from my brilliant predecessor, Jane Lennon, back in 2020. The only poor bit about the timing was, of course, that was during the pandemic, which made my first headship very interesting indeed. But it's been 5 brilliant years as head, and the school is a really special place to be. So the decade genuinely has whizzed past.
I can imagine it has. And of course, we've had Jane on the podcast in her new role at Allane's multiple times now. You describe your approach to learning at Wimbledon High as playful scholarship. Could you tell us more about what that means and how your pupils benefit from that ethos?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll be more aware than anybody, Chloe, that London academically selective girls' schools can have a little bit of a stereotyped reputation about them. So we hate the word, but the word hothouse is often used to associate with us. And this idea that learning is all about exam results, and it's terribly stressful and difficult, and anxiety abounds. And actually, because particularly our school is a 4 to 18 through school, and we're all on one site, we do have a very joyful and playful atmosphere. So the 4-year-olds will be mentored by the sixth formers, and we make sure that play is at the heart of everything we do. And I don't think personally, and this really is a personal sort of pedagogical approach, that there is any contradiction at all in being really deeply scholarly, really enjoying delving into ideas and the very most challenging of ideas as well, but also enjoying yourself being light and free and playful. And we also know that going forward in their lives, the girls will need to have a playful and curious approach to problem solving. They'll need to be agile minds. They'll need to be flexible thinkers and not see a problem as daunting, but rather an opportunity to play around with ideas. So the playful scholarship mantra really is one that we know not only will mean they enjoy their school life much more, but they'll also go out into the world undaunted by the unknown, which I think more and more now is really important.
And having been there in person many times, there is such interaction, isn't there, between the juniors and the seniors? It's a lovely kind of connected situation with the playgrounds and everything. In preparation for this interview, you also shared in the current landscape of single-sex schools going co-ed, we firmly believe that a girls-only education works best for girls. And we also interviewed Carol yesterday, obviously, as the head of the GDST, talking very much about the importance of educating girls. Why do you feel that girls-only education continues to be so important in the modern day?
Yeah, it's really interesting question, Chloe, and I think, gosh, we could unpack it for the entirety of this podcast, really. I mean, the first thing I'd say is that the results really speak for themselves. And it always really interests me that even though, if you look just at the raw A-level and GCSE results, for example, girls-only schools absolutely dominate the top 20. And in fact, there's often 4, sometimes 5 GDST schools alone in that top 20, so representing a quarter of the best schools in the country. And yet no one is banging down our door to ask us how we do it. You know, it's just sort of a given that they do it and almost seen as negative. So we know it works in terms of outcomes. We know that young women who achieve to the best of their ability, that often goes with a great sense of self-efficacy and self-confidence. But also, unfortunately, it is very evidenced that the modern world, as we've described it here, actually hasn't moved on, particularly when it comes to the treatment of girls and women. And we have seen, I think it's fair to say, a slide backwards in some of the ways in which girls and women are discussed online, in the ways in which girls are treated in some co-ed schools. I'm not talking about all. But it is true that with social media and the relentlessness and the early sexualization of young girls now, that actually all girls' schools give them a space of peace away from some of that so that they can find out who they are. And one of the, I guess, rebuttals I get to that at open days would be, well, that doesn't represent the real world, does it? You know, they need to get ready for the real world. Well, in my view, if you can find out who you are, center yourself, really understand your value, where your voice is, locate it and use it when you would like to, when necessary. That is the best possible preparation for going out into the real world and being able to find your space and own it. I don't really believe in mimicking the stresses and difficulties of the real world for 4-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 16-year-olds at a time when they're actually developing and finding out who they are. So I think girls' schools still are a really fundamental part of that development of our future women leaders. I wish it weren't the case. I would love to say in 2025 they were completely unnecessary. And if I'm out of a job in the next 10 years because the world has radically changed for girls and women, I'll be thrilled. But I suspect, sadly, Chloe, that's not going to be the case.
No, I think we've got a very long way to go. The GDST's Girls' Futures report found that 39% of girls aged 18 feel negatively about their future. And in actual fact, since the many things taking place in the world, we've had a lot of young girls writing directly to the magazine. Wow. With their concerns. So double the percentage who feel this at age 14, and only 8% believe that the school fully equips them for adulthood. You've got a dedicated futures programme for students across the school, as well as drawing on connections and opportunities across the GDST that also feature on our podcast for this next edition. Could you tell us more about how you at Wimbledon High work to prepare the girls with the skills and the confidence to thrive both at and beyond school?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I'd say is, sadly, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that 39% of girls aged 18 feel negatively about their future. I mean, I'm 44 and I read the paper and I feel pretty negative about the future. And also they are being bombarded with extremely powerful people who have extremely influential platforms saying things like, we just need more masculine energy in the boardroom. Thank you, Bezos. Zuckerberg, Musk, and dare I say it, Trump, all of whom are sending these messages. Plus, there is a huge amount of uncertainty, we know, with many, many people citing that now very, I think, cliched percentage of 80% of the jobs in the future haven't been created yet. Now, that's really difficult because a lot of young people want to look up to role models and think, I want to be more like them. what they do looks really fun. They're being told not only that there is less place now for girls and women in the workforce, but also that the workforce they could look up to doesn't exist. So what we need to do is stop looking at careers as a sort of bolt-on like it was when I was at school in the 80s and 90s, where a teacher would sort of do a test on you and then tell you what your career might be. First of all, it makes no sense to me to have careers taught by a teacher. Sadly, it's a very low percentage of girls in my school who want to become teachers, and I certainly didn't when I was at school. So I understand that. So you need somebody with industry experience, somebody who's really lived and breathed it. So our head of enterprise and employability is a former trader. She cut her teeth on the trading floor. She is absolutely tough as nails. She's brilliant. She has an extensive little black book where she can help the girls to get work experience for themselves. She teaches them to use LinkedIn profiles. So really getting sort of professional ready, but also the golden thread of the skills that run through everything we do, whether that's classroom teaching, co-curricular, which is oral modelling. How do we articulate through rather than with emotion? And we start that in year 7 with our civil discourse programme that I teach myself, making sure that we can sit with something that we find uncomfortable or even offensive and be able to articulate ourselves through that. As I mentioned, the playful scholarship means that we find problems enticing, that we engage in a curious way with the world around us, that we know how to work with other people and collaborate, all of these softer skills that we know are being asked for in the workplace. So even if we can't say with the same certainty as before, yes, I will be a lawyer and a lawyer all my life, what we can say is each girl will go out knowing that whatever is thrown at her and whatever path she wants to pursue, even if it's for a short period of time or for a lifetime, she's got everything she needs in her toolkit ready to go.
Fantastic. Do you have an entrepreneur in residence, or is
yes, so our head of employability does that exactly. But also the GDST is brilliant because they run entrepreneurship competitions across the trust. They have I'm sure Cheryl mentioned it yesterday, they have a big financial program that the girls can all engage in where they invest and compete to see who earns the most. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity the GDST offers at that level as well.
In the same futures report, we've obviously read it very closely.
Yeah.
You also shared opportunities to lead need to be in abundance throughout a student's journey through school. But there are also less explicit routes to becoming a good leader, developing skills of self-efficacy, motivation, and clear, compassionate communication will also assist our young people to become the leaders of the future. Could you tell us more about how, again, I mean, you talked about previously the soft skills, but obviously, being able to work with other people, being a team player, being able to cope with failure, they're all things that we're all talking about more and more now as a part of education. And how do you give the students opportunities to lead at Wimbledon High School and beyond?
So I'm sure you can imagine, as can the listeners, there are the traditional paths, so obviously we have a student leadership team in the 6th form. But again, unlike when I was at school, they actually do an awful lot. They're given serious responsibility. They run special days for everyone else. And they have to keep up their role all the way through the year. My experience in other schools has been someone becomes head girl and is sort of brilliant at it for 2 weeks and then the shine wears off and off they go. They need to understand that leadership is leadership through service, not leadership through status. And I think that's really important. So there are also, however, many quieter paths towards influence and leadership in the school that I think are just as, if not more interesting. So, for example, we have subject mentors. And my favourite thing to do, Chloe, is come in on a Tuesday morning, 7:30 in the morning, and you walk into the senior hall, and there are pockets of 6th formers and year 11s with younger girls working through a tricky Pride and Prejudice essay or a bit of factorials that a year 9 was really struggling with. And the relationships they form is just wonderful. But the other thing that really matters to us, and this is really important and crucial to the girls' development as potential leaders, is our partnerships work. So we make sure that we have more than 300 children from local primary schools every single week come in on site, and they are mentored and taught by our 6th formers and year 11s. We have our own juniors who have paired reading with our girls, but we even have really controversial and challenging partnerships. So we work with the local women's prison, where certain girls are in charge of making sure that every prisoner every Christmas has a Christmas present and a handwritten card, because in some cases that's the only one they get. And me and a few colleagues as well offer enhancements to the educational service down at the prison, because we want to make sure that the girls understand when we say at Wimbledon High that we advocate on behalf of girls and women, we mean all girls and women, not just those that are deemed acceptable by society. So making sure that the girls become compassionate and thoughtful leaders. And we're really excited because I think the epitome of compassionate and thoughtful leadership is coming in to speak to us and 20 other partner schools on the 16th of June. And that's Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, is coming. And we've chosen to host because of the values match. And I think, honestly, there could be no greater compliment to our school, I think, Chloe, than that. It's going to be brilliant.
It sounds incredible. We'll have to make sure that we chat to you afterwards. Wellbeing and pastoral care is also particularly important, with the Girls' Futures report finding that girls' highest priority ambitions are focused on their well-being. How do you support girls' well-being, particularly in relation to the healthy use of, and I think we've mentioned this already, really, of technology and social media? We've obviously had adolescents recently on the television, which we know can have a significant impact, particularly on girls in their teenage years.
Yeah, and there's really terrifying, isn't there, research out there about that. I think it's all about balance. So it's very tempting to shut all of the devices away for the whole of their childhood. But then really, are they going to emerge age 18 into a Luddite world? I mean, no, they will then be completely confounded. So trying to balance education and self sort of restriction, self-evaluation of how it's going, how to know when you're feeling like it's been too much, or what to do if you make a big mistake on social media, which you are likely to do at some point in your teenage years, making sure that they have someone they can go to who will listen to them without judgment and help them. All of those things are really important. But at the same time, I do want them to have time away from their phones. They've got to. So juniors aren't allowed them at all in our senior school, because so many of the girls travel independently to school. Many of them will bring a mobile phone in, but they are locked away all day. And we have special see-through lockers that sit on top of their lockers so we can see that they've locked them away. And then all the way up through the school, they're not allowed to have them out. And I think that's really important because they do have some ed tech in the classroom, although I would say it's sort of 60-40 analog digital, because of course exams are still very much paper and pen. If I'm honest, I think there's been a little bit of a overemphasis on how damaging this is, and it's leaked into all technology now. And I do think there's a hint of hysteria about that. You read about the invention of the radio and how this was supposed to make everybody into some sort of complete moron. I worry about being middle-aged and just panicking about things, and you've actually got to look at the research and look at maybe cause and correlation distinctions that could be made better, and make sure that you are not buying into that notion of making that generation feel as though they should be anxious because their life is so difficult and they're so bombarded. Actually, lots of our girls do read regularly. They are learning how you feel after an hour of doom scrolling, actually, just as I used to learn, to feel bad and not as good as I do when I read a book if I'd watched 3 hours of rubbish telly. You need to find these parameters for yourself with parental engagement, and that's really important, and with a school that has sensible policies. But I really don't think we should be demonizing anything. I don't think it's helpful. Social media is not going anywhere, neither are smartphones.
As a member of the GDST, your school and students have access to a network of over 100,000 members. My daughter went to Putney High. She goes in now and gives talks on being at UCL, trying to encourage other girls to do the same. How are your pupils able and encouraged to draw on and benefit from these connections, these really important connections?
Well, it's fantastic to hear about your daughter, because it's a great example of how it works. It's, I have to say, such a bonus. We've got a girl in year 9. It's pretty sure she'd like to be as a fighter pilot. Brilliant. Well, guess what? We've got 3 of those across the GDST in our alumni network. So she's been connected with one. She's going to go and meet with her. You've got your role models, specific role models everywhere. But also, when you go off to university, for some of our quieter girls, who perhaps are slightly dreading that really daunting, Freshers Week experience, to know that they can get in touch with somebody who's already there, even if they didn't go to their own school, but let's say they went to Wimbledon and someone from Putney is there. We now have a network of university get-togethers as well, where people can go, and it's in a really welcoming environment, just GDST. The other thing I'd say, of course, that is just tremendous is that slowly but surely over time, our GDST alumni are also donating legacy money, that sort of thing. So our network of bursary and scholarships as well, which obviously clearly as a bursary student myself, really helpful, so that more and more girls can access a brilliant GDST education. So I do feel as though there's a sort of army of incredible women out there that we are able to draw on when we need support and help. But who also represent the brilliance of the GDST and everything they do, like your daughter at UCL, and I hope encouraging other families, therefore, to consider us.
In this edition, we're particularly looking at schools in Oxford and Cambridge, and obviously Oxford and Cambridge universities, and the Oxbridge process, which children will be already preparing for. Parents often don't realise how early these preparations often are taking place. And Oxbridge is obviously an area that Wimbledon High is particularly successful in. You've got 14 pupils, I believe, going to Oxford and Cambridge, or went in 2024, as well as a whole range of top UK and US universities. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about how you're preparing students for this process? It's a highly competitive process.
And highly unpredictable.
And particularly for Oxbridge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting one because I think the key thing is to make sure that the students are applying for the right reasons. So if they're applying because their parents have always wanted them to go to an Oxford college and their parents went to Oxford or Cambridge, and it's about prestige, they're much less likely to find a place that suits them. If, however, they're applying because the way in which you are taught at those universities will suit you for your subject. So if you're like me and you're a very, as you can tell, Chloe, discursive person, Oxford and English suited me down to the ground. I find it very hard to sit and learn passively in a lecture hall, but if I'm engaging with somebody, it will always really lodge in my memory. And I like being left to my own devices to get on with things as well. So I loved long days in the library, just discovering and figuring things out for myself. For other people, that is their worst nightmare, and they actually need structure. And therefore, a humanities subject, Oxbridge is not for them. So you've really got to think about, will this suit me as a person and as a learner? And if the answer is yes, what we do is make sure that, yes, we are preparing them. So have what you'd expect, a subject mentor here, seminar style sessions to prepare them, but also lots of engagement and practice interviews and being put under pressure by people they don't know. And some of them actually say, it's almost easier with people you don't know than it is with your head teacher, because you can walk away. It's been a disaster, that's fine. So a thing that we started 2 years ago was our parents sign up for an Oxbridge Saturday, and they give us their subject specialisms and come in and grill 3 or 4 girls. And the girls have 2 or 3 interviews in one day, which mimics what may happen at some colleges. So the parents love it because they can dust off their Russian or their German or whatever it might be. And the students love it because you've got this dazzling array of brilliant people who are preparing you. We also team up with other schools. So Southampton High, another of our GDST schools, and because we're not competitors geographically, help each other out with that. And that's where things like Zoom are really, really helpful. You are right to say it starts early. And part of the playful scholarship approach, because we do fewer GCSEs to allow some space in the day for some breathing room to think about ideas. B, the fact that civil discourse is taught from year 7 all the way through means the girls hold up ideas with excitement and enjoy talking about them out loud. And frankly, if you can do that at an interview in Oxbridge, your chances of getting in are extremely high. That said, it is unpredictable. We had 14 last year, we've got 15 this year, but I take nothing for granted because the university landscape is changing quite dramatically. We also have many more girls now who don't apply to Oxbridge at all and who are looking at US, particularly the girls who play field hockey or do rowing because they get these enormous scholarships, and suddenly that is a very tempting offer.
You also hosted, and we've been very interested in this, the Educating Girls Symposium last year, welcoming over 200 educational leaders to discuss and celebrate girls' education. There was a strong emphasis throughout the event on hope and resilience, with one speaker saying, progress may have come with setbacks, but there is hope. And Cheryl Giovannoni stating, we teach the girls in our schools how important it is to be resilient, to take risks, to be fearless when they fail. They get up, dust themselves off, and try again. Never has that message been more important in our schools than right now. And it's a really, really important message. Why do you think that this is, with the work that you're doing and the International Coalition of Girls' Schools, why is it so important for you to come together? And what were the main takeaways from the event?
Yeah, I mean, the the timing of that symposium was such that we all gathered just as the news about Donald Trump being re-elected had come in that morning. And because it's the International Coalition of Girls' Schools was primarily an American foundation, clearly that resonated quite a lot in the room, a room filled with feminists. So I think the message about hope was really important. But what was interesting was the speaker who gave that message about there are setbacks, but there's always hope was Dorothy Byrne, who's the president of Mary Edwards College in Cambridge, one of the few remaining all-female institutions at any university, actually. And she, she's had a tremendously interesting career in media. And she was saying, look, do you really think this is the first time I've, at my age, experienced a setback? It's a drop in the ocean. We are further ahead than we were, back in the 70s. I promise you that we absolutely are. Don't lose hope. And that made us feel a lot better. I think in terms of the girls' school sector, it is true that some smaller girls' schools, some smaller independent schools more widely, but girls' schools as well are struggling. And I think it is also true that we keep having to justify our existence, as we mentioned, I suppose, earlier, to loop back round in this sort of modern world, what's our place? So the getting together, the reminder of what we do achieve and drawing strength from each other as female leaders in particular, I think was really empowering and important on that day. And we were so proud to host it. And I would just say to any educators listening who are interested in the ICGS, they really are the most impressive and tremendous organisation. And we've been a member of them for a very, very long time now. And Megan Murphy in particular, who leads the ICGS, I think speaks about girls' education with such authentic, impressive power. And I would really recommend listening to her to anyone out there.
On a final note, obviously we have many families who are very keen on Wimbledon High. What are your hopes and plans for the future of Wimbledon High School and girls' education as a whole?
It's so exciting to be able to talk about this because for the first 2 years of headship, it was just survive, get the school back open,
COVID,
bring back
lockdown.
The joy. Exactly. So we do feel now we've had 3 solid years under our belt of moving forward. And one thing I would say was we were really looking at how do we stay the grounded, happy community that we are and just turn the dial up a little bit academically. And I feel like we've really done that. I mean, our summer results this year were unbelievable. To get over 50% A star at A level was just genuinely fantastic. We're so thrilled. But that is one stepping stone on the journey. And where we want to go is not to chase what other people consider to be the best girls' school, but to continue to attract and compel families who agree with our version of best. Best being each individual achieves to their very best, whilst maintaining that sense of balance and groundedness and fun and playfulness. And that's really where we're going to continue to head, as well as I would really like some more sports grounds, please, because our sport, I mean, Jane set the ball rolling, sorry for the sports analogy, but she did with sport. She and I both came from co-ed boarding school backgrounds, arrived here and thought, my goodness, why aren't there Saturday fixtures? What's wrong? She really got us going. Our sport is now, I mean, I'm just so tremendously proud of it. It's so impressive, but we're running out of space. So we need more sports grounds, continue to turn the dial up academically whilst jealously guarding the special Wimbledonian spirit that is our culture. That is where I'd like to go. And we'll see where that takes us. But obviously next step, Chloe, world domination. That's what we're looking for.
nothing wrong with that. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you, and I know so many parents are going to be so keen to hear everything that you say. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Chloe. It's great to be with you.